Hello and welcome back, and today it's time for another Plex Media server test, and this time it's going to be utilising the brand new QNAP TVS675. We're going to be running the same test files that we've done previously, and we're going to be seeing how this NAS does with all of our different file format types. Now, for those more astute of you that noticed, this NAS is a TVS NAS. That means it has a video component on board. Yes, this CPU inside the TVS675, an 8-core processor with a model ID that I genuinely have tried several times to pronounce and I just can't. It makes me a terrible person. Does have embedded graphics inside C960, and from there we're hoping we're going to see something special from this 8-core CPU, despite the fact that it arrives at an arguably more affordable price point than the Intel i5s and i3s that we've seen in similar 6 and 8 bay NASes from QNAP. We're going to be running the same files as before, a few 720p and 1080p movies, and the Jellyfish files. We are utilizing full transcoding there, and on this system we are going to be running there the benchmarks on the right hand side telling us about the device's utility of memory, CPU and bandwidth, although bandwidth is less important. This NAS also is utilizing 8 gig of memory internally, and that's really everything we need to know. We've got the whole device set up, we're using our test files, and I think we can just go ahead and begin the tests. There's the matrix. We can go ahead and click and play that file. It's going to be there at the bottom of the screen. And from there, we can also bring that up a little bit higher there, and then from there, leave the file to play. And then maybe I'm going to turn the fans off on my laptop there in the background because that will make a lot more noise as we record this video. So we're leaving it to play there in the background, and if we open up the settings there at the bottom, you can see that we're running the original HD quality. I'd say it's 720p HD. So we can go through, flick between the movie, and as usual, absolutely fine there. It's playing it nice and easy, flick between, no problems whatsoever. But now let's get in with some transcoding. So next, we're going to go from 720p down to 480p. And that was instantaneous, that transition there. Still absolutely fine as we flick between them, no problems whatsoever. Still catching up perfectly fine. Once again, we are using OBS to record this video, so I apologise if the occasional blurring happens, but that won't be the NAS and its transcoding doing that. If it is, I will highlight that, but if that does occur in post-production, that's why, because of OBS. So next, I'm going to go down to slightly more egregious qualities at 240p now. 240p always seems to be a tricksy one whenever I do these tests. Regardless of the quality, 240p always seems to throw a curveball to these NASes, and although it transcodes it, it seemingly utilises quite a lot of power while it's doing it. Do bear in mind that the number of cores that can be handed to a given task isn't strictly as straightforward as just chucking all of the available resources at it. There's a lot more to it than that. But this file format change here, as always, has been quite difficult for the system to take on the fly. And if we go down to the lowest quality there at 160p, we can have a little look, give it a bit of extra time, and we're on potato quality now. And as we can see, it's able to do it, but it's used a bit of a spike of processor power in order to do that. So again, this is quite a big encode that we've just performed there on screen. But let's come out of that and now go into our 1080p file, which is always a little shop of horrors. The original version of it, great movie, solid 10 out of 10 from me. But you didn't come to this YouTube channel for a movie review. Once again, this is 1.9 megabits per second, 1080p recording there, and it's running absolutely fine there. We can flick between it, doing fine, all great. And if we look at, while I'm flicking around here, we can look at the resources, not much being utilized at all. So let's now turn this down to 720p. 720p, nice fast transition there, all the way between them, going up to 4 megabits per second. Playback, absolutely fine there, running great, no difficulty whatsoever. Go down to 480, anticipating it to be a relatively smooth transition, but when we go to some of the teeny tiny ones, that's going to be problematic. As you see, as soon as we go down to the lower end of that spectrum, there's a lot of work being done per frame. So the denser the media that you're utilizing and the lower resolution you're putting it down to, the more work you are creating all the way through. Look at that high spike up there. That's quite high indeed. So again, for me, those are fairly smooth transitions. If we go down to the lowest one just to test it out, fully anticipating it to really tax that CPU inside there. And again, this is something, similar to this we saw on the i3 based 672X and the Ryzen embedded V1500B that we saw on the 873A. But I can definitely say that it's using a lot higher earlier doors than before. Generally, I saw those CPUs at early taxing getting to around 40 to 45, 60 at a push, whereas this has gone into the 80s very, very quickly indeed there. So let's come out of that, and now we're going to move into the hefty test files. These are the 4K Jellyfish files. As you can see, it is the same file, but each time the file is in a heftier format, going from as low as 3 megabits per second all the way up to 400 megabits per second, from 1080p down here to 4K UHD, 10-bit HDR kind of quality. Now, a few things to note before we take the test any further. First and foremost, let's bring that lower. It's worth highlighting that the file formats get bigger as we go through. As you see there, at its lowest, that 3 megabit per second file is simply 10 megabytes in size. They're all still 30 seconds long, but once we get to the highest one, that is 30 seconds of footage at 1.4 gigabytes. That's massive. So make sure you bear that in mind, and the chances are that very little of your entire collection is going to be this high quality here. 400 megabit 4K UHD HEVC, otherwise known as H.265, 10-bit HDR MKV at 1.4 gigabytes. We're going to test it, but I don't think this NAS is going to be able to play it. Sorry. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, while we're doing this, is that when we're testing these files, there's going to be a distinct difference between when we test H.264 and HEVC. H.264 is an older compression technique that's been around for a number of years. It's got very easy proprietary licensing. It's very, very common, and it can be used by pretty much any kind of file playback device for multimedia. Whereas HEVC has a lot more complex patterns behind it, and you will often find a lot of devices, including a lot of NASes and home media devices, will not be able to play back HEVC, or that's highly efficient video codec, or as it's otherwise known as H.265, easily, and will automatically need to convert this into this or something similar. So two files can be exactly the same in weight and in quality, as you see here with both of these files. Let's bring that closer there. You'll see that both of those files are 10-bit in HEVC and H.264. One is 35 meg, the other one is 35 meg, but both of those files at 10 meg, the HEVC one is going to tax the system harder because it's forced to convert it. So let's bring the NAS back up there. Let's leave that. Sorry, I've got about 4 or 5 windows open there in the background. And what we're going to do is play back the lowest quality file there. We're going to go for the one at the top, the 3 megabit file there. Let's bring zoom in a little bit because it's a little far away. So we're going to test that first file. This should be absolutely fine, no difficulty whatsoever. And again, the other thing to look out for is this dark orange bar at the bottom. That is how much of the file has been lined up and ready to play that we can flick in between. In YouTube, you'd think of it as buffering or caching, but what you'll notice is if we go into more common files and denser files for that matter, this orange bar will struggle to stay ahead of playback as the files get more complex. So do bear that in mind. Let's come out there, but again, absolutely fine. And we can convert it. We'll do one quick convert there. We'll go down to 720p. And we can see system's not really taxing itself too much. Now, have a good look at this chart here. This area of that graph is where we just played the H.264 version. Now we're going to play the same file, same density, but this time in HEVC. We open up the chart, and as you can see, automatically it's had to convert that file. It's already had to work before we've done anything. It's not even played the file first time. It needs to buffer a little bit, and it's had to do this big spike of activity here. Now, if it's going to do this at just 3 megabits per second, I'm not sure how much of our media that the TVS675 is going to be able to play today. And this is going to be a very important distinction there. It's got all the way to the end, but as you can see, the dark orange is slowly getting caught up by the light orange playback bar. Now, obviously, this is a 30-second file, but if you're watching a movie, 90, 120 minutes, you need to know that the system can cache and buffer and basically line up this media file enough ahead of your playback. And if you're going to fast forward and rewind, that's even more important. Now, the final file type of this genre here, 3 megabits per second HD HEVC 10-bit, this equals HDR. This is high quality media, and if we play it, this is going to be a pinch more demanding than the one we saw before. It can't get higher than 100%, and as we can see there, system utilization and Plex media server utilization, side by side, Plex is kind of pushing the system above it, and it can't go higher than this because the system needs resources as well. If we come out there, it's gone to 100. We're staying ahead, but again, how long we stay ahead, I reckon if this file was 3 to 4 minutes long, I don't think I could guarantee that this would stay ahead on this HDR HEVC file. I think not even that, maybe within 2.5 minutes, playback would overrun and therefore it would stop running. So that's to give you some idea how well it plays those file types. But what's really interesting is if we play back only the H.264 files, regardless of size, you'll notice the system will be able to play them quite well. So, case in point, this is the 10 megabit file. So again, this is technically a denser file than the one we've just played in HDR and H.265 or HEVC, but because of that file format and the codec support, it can play it, and it's not taxing the system. Look at it there. Again, we can go one higher. Let's go into 30 megabits per second. And at this point, we might start to see, we're seeing the tiniest bit of struggle, but not much. It still managed to do the whole file. It's still playing it back. Everything's running absolutely fine. It accidentally paused it. So again, can't really have a go at it there. Let's go one higher. We're going to go to 100 megabit H.264 1080p media. It's having a bit of a think first. It needs a bit of a run up, but not too much. And here we go. We're now playing back this pretty dense file, but because it's in the older compression technique, it's still doing fine with a tiny little bump there as it's playing back. But as you can see, it's catching up. It's only just staying ahead while it compresses these larger frame rates of multimedia there, but it did get to the end. Now we're moving to the 4K files for H.264. This is a 120 megabit 4K version. We'll play that one. Get the details there on screen. And again, as you can see, this is the 4K version. It's lining it up. And again, if you are considering this NAS for 4K media enjoyment, if you're utilizing Plex and you're not planning on using transcoding, here right now is the proof in the pudding whether it's going to play, and it stopped at 5. This is never a good sign. This generally means that the NAS is kind of maxed out in what it's able to handle in a given transaction, and I think it's probably going to kick us out. We're going to give it a second try, give it a second chance before we completely write it off at 120 megabits, which is still pretty good for a NAS. But given this NAS is 1,200 pounds, we'd like to think it is going to be able to play media perhaps a pinch better than that. This isn't the best Plex Media Server 6 bay out there, but you want to know how far you can push this device graphically. And right now it looks like it's going to keep hitting that 0.05 seconds wall there. We're going to give it a few more seconds before we kick out and try a denser file type and then move back onto the HEVC files. but no luck at all. And now we're going to try our densest H.264 file, the 200 megabits per second one. Let's see if it hits that wall at 5 seconds again, or it's able to overcome that and play back this file. There's the 5 second mark, and I think we're going to hit another wall again. Yep, it looks like it's not going to go further than that. So I'm not sure whether I would recommend this device for 4K playback in Plex Media Server. I'm sure natively it will absolutely storm it, but right now in Plex, for me, this is about as far as things can go, and 4K isn't really on the menu. Now, once again, if we move back into the NAS, remember that as we've gone through these, that last file we just tried to play, that one weighed in at 716 megabytes. So again, 2/3 of a gig, just over, of data for a 30-second file. You know, that's quite a lot of data. That's bigger than a lot of ripped 1080p movies. And this is 30 seconds of footage, not 90 minutes of rom-com. So let's go back to some of those HEVC files there. So let's try this one. This is the 10 megabit version. I think we can agree that every one of these is going to tax the internal hardware pretty high. It's got past that 5 seconds, so it is going to play back, but it's whether it can hold on to that playback behind the buffering, or is it going to overtake the buffering and therefore invalidate this test, because if it's going to do this at 30 seconds, then there's no way this is going to work on some 90 or 120 minute movie. But as it gathers pace, I think it might stay ahead, but barely. It looks like that lead that it has is slowly diminishing more and more. And again, I think maybe a 2 minute, 1.5 minute file would have killed that off pretty smoothly. Let's go for the 30 megabits per second alternative. Things are getting denser for our 10-bit HEVC media there. Again, we're seeing the spikes there in the hardware quite substantially. As always, memory is less of a concern when it comes to Plex, but I always do recommend that you have a good 2 to 4 gigabytes of memory minimum for Plex Media Server. That picture quality is just lovely. The density of that focus between the different jellyfish are fantastic. But again, that playback, it may even overtake that of the buffering there before the 30-second mark. I think we are looking at the breaking point for this within that 30-second. I can hear the fans of the NAS starting to kick in a couple of meters away, but there you go, it paused, and that tells you that is pretty much the breaking point for that. I'm going to wrap things up, but before I do that, I think it would be remiss for us to not even try to play the biggest file with auto transcoding. Let's go for it there. I always like to end on this file, but it's, again, definitely worth remembering that the file we're trying to play here is massive. This is not your light file. This isn't going to be your average recording from TV. This is an incredibly dense file. Imagine 30 seconds at 1.4 gigabytes. That means every minute is 2.8 gigabytes. Every 10 minutes is going to be 20.8 gigabytes of footage. That's crazy. And that was some terrible maths there. Sorry, I was looking at too many numbers on screen. Let me fly on that one. But yep, it's kicked us out. We're going to end this test here. Do I recommend this NAS for Plex? Probably not. I would say I would recommend this ideally for surveillance or VM use, I would say, or a business class file server. It'll be alright for multimedia stuff on the side if you're going to use the proprietary onboard video station app from QNAP, or if you're going to use DLNA, stuff like that. Or if you're going to be restricted to just 1080p recordings in H.264 and you're not going to be utilizing transcoding or any kind of reshaping of files on the fly. But I wouldn't really recommend this NAS right now for the likes of Plex Media Server at 4K, or generally Plex Media Server for transcoding. It's a good NAS, but maybe it's not good enough for this one prosumer task. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe, and do, if you are looking for the right Plex Media Server, use the free advice section linked in the description to take you to NAS Compares, our free advice section manned by 2 people, me and Eddie the Web Guy. We are 2 guys giving free advice. You don't have to pay us. We're not going to do anything with your email. There's some donate buttons. That would be lovely if you use them, but you don't have to. And other than that, take advantage of it. I'll see you next time.